What if the roles that made legends were almost given to someone else? Behind every iconic performance that shaped Hollywood's golden age is a battle most people never saw, a war waged in audition rooms, studio board meetings, and smoke-filled corridors where image mattered more than integrity. These weren't just actors, they were fighters. Not for Oscars, but for the right to be seen. Studios had their molds. If you didn't fit, you were out. Too short, too intense, too strange, too female. They said no to Brando, laughed at Streisand, ignored Fonda, blacklisted Bergman. Even Leigh, now inseparable from Scarlett O'Hara, was told the part wasn't for her after 1,400 other actresses were considered. Yet somehow, these stars pushed back. They rewrote contracts, called in favors, risked careers, and in doing so, they reshaped cinema itself. This is not a tribute to fame. It's a chronicle of resistance, of the bruises beneath the glamour, of the roles that nearly never were. Which star do you think had the toughest fight for the role that defined them? Let's begin. 1. Vivien Leigh, the Englishwoman America didn't want. Before Gone with the Wind became legend, it was nearly someone else's story. Over 1,400 actresses were considered for Scarlett O'Hara, from Katharine Hepburn to Paulette Goddard. David O. Selznick wanted an American sweetheart. Vivien Leigh was British, unknown in the States, and worst of all, perceived as too refined for the fiery Southern belle. She wasn't even invited to audition, but Leigh had other plans. She flew to Hollywood on her own dime, convinced her lover, Laurence Olivier, to pull strings. Even then, Selznick dismissed her until he saw her screen test. It wasn't her beauty that won him over. It was the steel in her eyes. Scarlett O'Hara was born that day, and so was Vivien Leigh's American stardom. Ironically, the very accent that almost lost her, the role became part of her mystique. Would another actress have endured the physical toll Leigh did, collapsing during reshoots, battling bipolar disorder in silence, and still delivering a performance for the ages? Would Gone with the Wind be remembered the same if it had starred anyone else? 2. Marlon Brando, the star no one wanted. By the early 1970 seconds, Marlon Brando was cinematic poison. Unreliable, difficult, box office kryptonite. So when Francis Ford Coppola insisted Brando play Don Vito Corleone in The Godfather, Paramount fought back hard. Brando was banned from studio lots. Executives called him finished. They offered the role to Ernest Borgnine, Danny Thomas, even Laurence Olivier. All declined. Still, Coppola pushed. The studio agreed on one condition: Brando must audition, wear prosthetic jowls, and take a pay cut. For a two-time Oscar winner, this was humiliating. Brando complied. He stuffed cotton balls in his cheeks, mumbled like a man with ghosts in his throat, and recorded the now iconic screen test in a dimly lit room. The footage changed everything. The executives watched in silence. One reportedly whispered, "That's him." But Brando didn't just act the Don. He reinvented male authority on screen. Soft-spoken, terrifying, paternal yet deadly. And yet, imagine if Coppola hadn't fought. Would The Godfather have meant the same with a safer choice? Or would it have died as just another mobster flick? 3. Audrey Hepburn, Too Fragile to Be Fair. When Warner Brothers announced the musical adaptation of My Fair Lady, the world expected one name: Julie Andrews. She had originated Eliza Doolittle on Broadway. She was Eliza. But the studio had other ideas. They wanted star power. Audrey Hepburn was radiant, bankable, and beloved. But she was also too delicate, not trained for musicals, and some claimed a poor fit for Cockney grit. Critics mocked the choice. Andrews was heartbroken. Hepburn was horrified when she learned her singing would be dubbed by Marni Nixon. Still, she pressed on. She trained tirelessly, lost weight under pressure, and absorbed Eliza's transformation with quiet fury. Her screen presence, vulnerable yet determined, won over audiences worldwide. But behind the beauty was a woman battling ulcers and crushing insecurity, and the backlash never fully disappeared. Decades later, people still ask, did Audrey steal the role? Or did the system silence Julie for being too theater and not enough movie? But maybe the real question is, who turned the flower girl into a myth, Broadway's voice or Hollywood's face? 4. Sigourney Weaver, Too Tall for Terror. In 1979, Alien was just another sci-fi horror pitch. The lead character, Ripley, wasn't even written as a woman. The studio imagined a tough, rugged male survivor, something between Clint Eastwood and Steve McQueen. When Sigourney Weaver auditioned, a silence followed. She was 6 feet tall, unproven, and worst of all, theatrical. Ridley Scott saw something else. He fought to cast her, but the studio resisted. "No one will buy a female hero who doesn't scream." In response, Weaver gave them silence, deadpan, simmering, calculating. On set, she clashed with effects teams, demanded script changes, and refused to play Ripley as a damsel. The chestburster scene? She stayed in character even as chaos unfolded. Ripley wasn't just a survivor, she was command. Today, Alien is hailed as a feminist landmark. But what if the studio had gotten its way? Would we have ever seen a woman lead not by seduction, but by unapologetic competence? 5. Dustin Hoffman, not handsome enough to graduate. When Mike Nichols cast The Graduate, he envisioned a leading man who mirrored America's youth, awkward, brilliant, uncertain. Studios imagined Robert Redford, blonde, polished, bankable. Then came Dustin Hoffman, short, Jewish, anxious. No one thought he stood a chance. Executives whispered, "He looks like the guy who installs your phone line." Nichols disagreed. In a secret screen test, Hoffman bumbled through scenes with unpolished genius. Nichols saw truth, but the studio saw a problem. He's not a leading man. Hoffman won the role, but at a cost. He became the symbol of a new era in film, one where beauty bent to authenticity. Ironically, the very qualities that almost lost him, the role made Benjamin Braddock real. Would The Graduate have become a generational anthem if it starred another golden boy? Or was Hoffman's discomfort exactly what the role and the country needed? 6. Sally Field, not star enough to matter. In the late 1970s, Sally Field was America's sweetheart if you only remembered her from Gidget or The Flying Nun. She wanted more. When Norma Rae came along, she saw her chance, a raw, working-class woman fighting for labor rights. The studio didn't. They wanted a name, a face with cinema weight. Field was deemed too light, too TV. The director, Martin Ritt, had to beg. Field had to audition again and again, each time with more grit, more silence, more burn behind the eyes. She got the part, and she burned the screen. Norma Rae earned her an Oscar, but more than that, it erased the cute girl narrative that shadowed her career. She fought to be taken seriously and won, but the fight left scars. Field later admitted, "I spent most of that shoot afraid they'd take it away from me." So we ask how many women like Field never got that one shot, and how many still won't. 7. Gene Wilder, the man they thought was too gentle. When Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was in development, the producers wanted someone funny but unpredictable. The studio lobbied for well-known comics Joel Grey, Ron Moody, even Fred Astaire. Gene Wilder was barely in the conversation. He was too soft, too mild, too gentle. Then Wilder proposed something radical. "I'll play Wonka if I can make my entrance limping with a cane, then somersault into a bow." Why? Because from that moment on, the audience would never know if he was lying. Producers hesitated. Wilder insisted. He told them, "This character must always leave people guessing. That's the danger. That's the magic." He wasn't just fighting for the role. He was fighting for control of how the role was shaped. The result? A performance that balanced whimsy with menace, innocence with madness. Children loved him. Adults weren't sure whether to laugh or be afraid. If someone else had taken the role, would Wonka have been a sugary fantasy or the layered enigma Wilder made him? 8. Christopher Reeve, the unknown who outflew the stars. The search for Superman was a studio headache. They wanted a name: Paul Newman, Robert Redford. Even Sylvester Stallone lobbied for the part. All were rejected. The producers wanted the myth, not the man. Then came Christopher Reeve, a Juilliard-trained actor with zero star power and too thin a frame. Studio execs called him a string bean in tights. Reeve didn't argue. He trained intensely, gaining 30 pounds of muscle, altering his posture, voice, even jaw tension between Clark Kent and Superman. But it wasn't just physical. Reeve brought vulnerability to a character that risked becoming a caricature. Behind the cape was loneliness. His screen test silenced the room. The irony? Reeve only got the chance after 200 bigger names passed, and once he landed, he never flew the same way again. Typecast forever as Superman. So was it a victory or a trap? 9. Jodie Foster. The teen Hollywood tried to protect itself from. When Martin Scorsese cast Taxi Driver, he knew he needed someone disturbing. Not a cliché, not a caricature, a real child, a real victim, a real mirror. Jodie Foster was just 12. Hollywood panicked. Casting a preteen as a sex worker? The studio demanded a rewrite, offered alternative actresses, suggested implied trauma. Foster refused. She read the script, understood it, fought for it. The fight wasn't just about casting, it was about letting her be aware of what she was portraying. A social worker had to be present on set. Her sister stood in for graphic scenes, but the performance was hers. all her. Today, Taxi Driver is cited as a turning point in American cinema, and Foster's portrayal of Iris, broken, manipulative, still somehow a child, remains untouchable. But the question lingers, was this bravery or exploitation? And who really fought harder, Foster, or a system that tried to keep her away from her own power? 10. Robert De Niro, the boxer who refused to break. By the late 1970s, Robert De Niro was already acclaimed but not immortal. That would come with Raging Bull, the story of Jake LaMotta. Violent, volatile, venomous. Studios said no. Too dark, too brutal. No audience wanted to watch a self-destructive anti-hero for 2 hours. Even Scorsese, fresh off a near-death experience, hesitated. But De Niro wouldn't let go. He trained with LaMotta himself, learned to box at a professional level. Then, in a decision that stunned everyone, he gained over 60 pounds to portray the aging, broken LaMotta, endangering his health for a character nobody wanted him to play. He pushed the script, fought to keep the most disturbing scenes intact, refused to soften the man. When the film finally released, it wasn't a box office hit, but De Niro won the Oscar, and the performance became the gold standard for transformation. So was he proving something to the world or to himself? 11. Faye Dunaway, the woman they thought was too much. By 1976, Faye Dunaway had a reputation brilliant but difficult. When Network came around, the studio flinched. They wanted someone younger, softer, easier, but no one else could be Diana Christensen. Dunaway saw it. She refused to blink. Playing a woman so consumed by ratings, she allowed a man's televised suicide for numbers. Cold, calculating, magnetic, executives asked her to add more warmth. She refused. She became the face of everything Hollywood feared, a woman who used power the way men had for decades, and she was punished for it. After her Oscar win, the roles dried up. Dunaway didn't just fight for Diana, she became her. And Hollywood punished both. Was the industry afraid of the character, or the woman who played her too well? 12. Barbra Streisand, the director no one took seriously. Barbra Streisand had conquered Broadway, then film, then music. But when she wanted to direct and star in Yentl, studios shut her down. You can't direct yourself in a period piece. You're too old to play a student. Nobody wants to see a woman play a boy who becomes a rabbinical scholar. Every door slammed. So she built her own. She produced, directed, co-wrote, and starred in Yentl, rehearsed scenes in secret, storyboarded every frame, mortgaged her own finances. The film premiered to shock and awe. A woman had pulled off what the studios said couldn't be done. She won the Golden Globe for Best Director, but the Academy snubbed her. To this day, Yentl is studied in film schools, not just for its themes, but as an act of pure, defiant authorship. So the question remains, did she fight the system, or simply prove it never included her to begin with? 13. Jack Nicholson, the role he waited 20 years to play. Before One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest became a modern classic, the role of Randall McMurphy was stuck in limbo. Ken Kesey's novel had buzz, but Hollywood didn't know what to do with it. First, Kirk Douglas bought the rights and kept them for years. He aged out of the role and passed it to his son, Michael. Jack Nicholson waited. He'd been circling the character since the late 60 seconds, but was always told he wasn't the right kind of rebel. Too weird, too unpredictable. Studios feared he'd turn McMurphy into a cartoon, but Nicholson saw what they didn't. McMurphy wasn't a hero. He was a symbol of defiance, flawed, loud, broken. He took the part and obliterated it. No actor had ever weaponized charm against institutional control the way Nicholson did. His eyes burned with mischief, then rage, then madness. The film swept the Oscars. But here's the irony. Nicholson didn't win the role because he fit. He won it because, like McMurphy, he refused to be institutionalized by Hollywood's safe casting. So, how many others were too dangerous to be trusted with power and disappeared without a fight? 14. Jane Fonda, too political to be taken seriously. In 1971, Jane Fonda was radioactive. She protested Vietnam, marched for civil rights, and was branded Hanoi Jane. Studios feared she'd destroy any film by simply appearing in it. Then came Clute, the role. A high-end call girl tangled in a murder case, dark, damaged, and far removed from the sex kittens of the era. Fonda wanted it, needed it, but the studio balked. She's too controversial. She'll politicize the film. Director Alan Pakula insisted. Fonda dove into research, visiting sex workers, studying trauma psychology, reshaping the character with nuance and sorrow. On set, she was clinical, composed, obsessive. She won the Oscar. But more than that, she redefined the cinematic woman, no longer just victim or vixen, but a full, haunted human being. Still, she was never forgiven by many. She said later, "I didn't win them over. I just made it impossible to ignore me." Would a safer actress have survived that role or been swallowed whole by it? 15. Charlton Heston, the actor who rewrote the epic. When Ben-Hur was greenlit in 1959, it was more spectacle than story. MGM needed a hit, fast. They had the money. They had the chariots. They didn't have a soul. Charlton Heston signed on reluctantly. He didn't love the script. He didn't believe the character had depth. And so he fought, rewrote scenes, demanded rewrites, refused direction he felt was hollow. The studio clashed with him, called him arrogant. But Heston believed Judah Ben-Hur needed more than vengeance. He needed transformation. He worked with uncredited writers, pushed for subtext, even helped choreograph action sequences for emotional impact, not just thrills. The result was epic, not just in size, but in meaning. Heston won the Oscar. The film won 11. And Ben-Hur became more than a biblical saga. It became a morality tale of resistance, forgiveness, and fate. But here's the hidden truth. The role didn't shape him. He shaped the role against every note the studio gave him. So we ask, how many blockbusters hide buried battles for meaning behind the muscles and spectacle? 16. Gloria Swanson, the forgotten queen who resurrected herself. By 1950, Gloria Swanson was a relic. She had ruled the silent era, feathers, jewels, and close-ups. But when sound arrived, she vanished. For 2 decades, she drifted through theater, television, fading into nostalgia. Then came Sunset Boulevard. Paramount offered the role of Norma Desmond, a delusional former star yearning for relevance. Swanson saw danger. The part mirrored her life too closely. Studios pushed for someone safer. Mae West refused. Mary Pickford was horrified. Swanson said yes, but she refused to play it for laughs. She saw tragedy, not parody. On set, she argued with Billy Wilder, demanded rewrites, and delivered one of the most unsettling performances in Hollywood history, not because it was exaggerated, but because it was eerily real. Norma wasn't just Gloria playing crazy. It was Gloria telling the truth about what fame does when the cameras stop. The film resurrected her career and buried the idea that age kills relevance. So, was Sunset Boulevard a comeback or a confession? 17. Ingrid Bergman, the exile who fought for redemption. Ingrid Bergman had it all: beauty, talent, prestige. Then she fell from grace. Her affair with Italian director Roberto Rossellini sparked a national scandal. She left her husband, had a child out of wedlock, was denounced on the floor of the U.S. Senate. Hollywood blacklisted her. For 7 years, she vanished from American screens. Then came Anastasia, the story of a woman who might or might not be royalty. The metaphor was too perfect. Bergman fought to play the part, though many believed she didn't deserve a second chance. Studios hesitated. The public hissed, but Bergman leaned in. Her performance was haunting, layered with doubt, dignity, and the ache of a woman trying to reclaim her place in history. She won the Oscar. When she accepted it, she simply said, "I left America, but I never left your hearts." But the question still lingers. Did she redeem herself, or did she force the industry to reckon with its hypocrisy? 18. Henry Fonda, the everyman who paid to be heard. By 1956, Henry Fonda was tired of studios shaping his characters, tired of being the moral compass in films that said nothing. Then came 12 Angry Men, a claustrophobic courtroom drama about doubt, justice, and prejudice. No studio wanted it. Too talky, no action, no women, no score, no future. Fonda believed in it so deeply, he put up his own money, became its producer, shot it in 17 days. Rehearsed with theater precision, directed by Sidney Lumet in his feature debut. The film flopped, but Fonda didn't care. He called it the most important film he ever made, and decades later, it's now required viewing in law schools and ethics seminars. He didn't fight for box office, he fought for meaning, for art, for moral ambiguity, for characters who don't win but don't lose themselves either. In a system built on spectacle, Fonda quietly proved that one room, one voice, and one man willing to risk everything could echo forever. 19. Mickey Rourke, the burned-out rebel who became the wrestler. By the early 2000s, Mickey Rourke was a ghost. Once a brooding icon of 9.5 Weeks and Angel Heart, he had self-destructed, clashing with directors, walking off sets, diving into underground boxing. Plastic surgeries distorted his face. Studios wouldn't return his calls. Then Darren Aronofsky came knocking. The Wrestler was about Randy the Ram Robinson, a once great performer, broken in body and soul, clinging to relevance. Rourke didn't need to act. He was the ram. Still, financiers resisted. They wanted Nicolas Cage, someone marketable. Aronofsky refused. Rourke trained for months, broke down during takes, rewrote lines to reflect his own battles. In one scene, as he thanks the crowd with tears in his eyes, the applause feels too real, because it is. He didn't just earn the role, he bled into it. The wrestler resurrected Rourke's career and exposed the brutal toll of survival. But the haunting question remains, did Mickey Rourke win or simply document how much he had already lost? 20. Bette Davis, the woman who sued Hollywood to be free. Before she became the grand dame of American cinema, Bette Davis was trapped. In the 1,930 seconds, under contract with Warner Brothers, she was handed script after script of forgettable roles, decorative women, vapid love interests, damsels without dimension. She begged for better parts. The studio refused, so she did the unthinkable. She sued her employer. In British court, she argued that Warner Brothers was limiting her artistry, treating her like property. She lost the case but won something greater, respect. Warner Brothers feared losing her, so they relented, gave her darker, riskier, more complicated characters. Jezebel, Now, Voyager, All About Eve. Each role sharpened her, each line dripped acid. She became impossible to ignore, not despite her rebellion, but because of it. Bette Davis didn't just fight for a role, she fought for the right to be difficult, to be complex, to be taken seriously in a system designed to flatten women, and perhaps that's the truest legacy of all. Bonus fact, Montgomery Clift, the role that slipped through his fingers. Montgomery Clift was once the future of Hollywood, introspective, wounded, magnetic. Long before Brando or Dean, Clift redefined masculinity. Not tough, but tortured. But by the mid-1950 seconds, the cracks had deepened. A devastating car crash shattered his face. Addiction followed. So did anxiety, isolation, and a growing tension with the studio system that saw him as both asset and liability. Then came On the Waterfront. Elia Kazan wanted him. Clift wanted the part. Terry Malloy, a washed-up boxer seeking redemption, was tailor-made for Clift's haunted presence. But the deal fell apart. Clift demanded script control, slower production, and creative oversight. Columbia balked. The role went to Marlon Brando. Brando won the Oscar. Clift spiraled further. He called it the one I should have fought harder for. In another timeline, it's Clift on that rooftop, whispering, "I could have been a contender." And somehow, it would have sounded even more like a confession than a performance. This isn't just a story of what was won, but what was lost when the fight was too hard, or when the world stopped listening. Hollywood was never just about talent. It was about pushing past the no, about rewriting the script sometimes, literally to be heard, to be seen, to exist. These 20 stories weren't about fame, they were about resistance. Against studios, against expectations, against erasure. For every star who made it, dozens didn't. And even those who did left scars behind the spotlight. Now it's your turn. Which of these battles surprised you most? And which star, in your eyes, truly earned the role that defined them? Let the curtain fall. Your voice belongs in the final act.